When Industry Week put together its inaugural Manufacturing Hall of Fame class in 2009, there were few shoo-ins. Jim Womack, however, was one of them. Although he is a thought leader and not a manufacturer, Industry Week wholeheartedly believed and still believes that Jim belongs in the very first Manufacturing Hall of Fame class alongside industry titans such as Lee Iacocca, Jack Welch, Steve Jobs, and Andrew Grove. One simple reason: perhaps no one has done more to advance the cause of lean manufacturing than Jim Womack. Through his research at MIT, his books such as The Machine That Changed the World, his creation of the Lean Enterprise Institute, his shop floor visits with managers and executives, Jim has introduced revolutionary continuous improvement concepts, codified the lean vocabulary, and helped countless manufacturers make the leap from simply employing lean tools to instituting management systems that produce concrete results day in and day out. Quote, "For a generation of managers, Womack represents the Marco Polo of lean," unquote, Industry Week declared in its December 2009 issue, going on to say that Womack brought back from Japan reports of a more efficient way of manufacturing products and now familiar terms such as Kaizen, Kanban, and Poka-yoke. For many people who study and practice continuous improvement, Jim Womack is synonymous with the phrase lean guru. So in the spirit of lean, I'm going to keep this introduction really short, and I'd like you to please help me welcome Jim Womack to the stage.
Well, I don't know. That's lean guru. And we got rid of that silly picture of me that some guy from some glossy magazine, not Industry Week, came and took that silly picture, and now it just pops up all over. So, the one with that. I mean, I don't know. Why did I do that? At least I wasn't in my underwear like Tom Peters. Okay. Wanted to talk a little bit about gemba walks, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. Let me just bring you up to date on where I am these days, because I have had a change. I looked at the calendar and was shocked. I subtracted 1948 from 2010 and came up with a very large number. And so I said I need to find someone who is younger and wiser to replace me. And so I found someone who is somewhat younger and a whole lot wiser, John Shook, who now gets to do that, go to the office and try to run a business thing that I did so poorly for so many years. And that means I've got more time to go walking. And time to be an author, which is one of the few things that I might have some ability at. So therefore, I have been out walking around. I have a book, which I'll talk about just very briefly. This is not a sales pitch for a book, but I do have a book just out in the last 10 days. As I do that, I'm always in a weird situation that I have never run anything. And Chet Marchwinski, our PR communications person from LEI, can in the corner tell you that I never ran LEI either. That I was just the pretend boss. We had others. Helen Zach, my deputy, actually ran the place. So I am the management expert who's never managed anything. I am the lean production guru who has never run a plant. I have never led an improvement team. I have spent my life being a bystander. Peter Drucker wrote a great memoir that I think few people read. It's a shame, called Adventures of a Bystander, in which Drucker says, I'm perhaps the great management thinker of the 20th century and I never managed anything. Isn't that strange? Well, look, there are odd things in life, but there are advantages to being a bystander. Actually, there are a lot of advantages to being a bystander because you don't have to have any of the answers. And let me suggest that you in your roles as manager leaders sometimes ought to think a little bit more like the bystander. I have spent years and years simply asking questions, not giving answers. And yet somehow most managers learn that the bigger you are, the more you should know and the more answers you should be able to give, which is exactly, totally, completely, utterly wrong. So we'll talk a little bit about walking and what might be useful in walking. Let me say just a couple of other things, that I'm particularly happy to be here this time. Against my better judgment, I gave a talk for this plant conference 10 years ago, and I violated my number one fundamental principle: no walk, no talk. And the reason was I was running a business. Well, I was pretending to run a business, and so I had no time to go see any of the winners. And so an Industry Week called up this time, said, would you do this? By the way, you don't get paid for doing this. You just do this because you're a good guy. I said, okay, there is a fee. And they said, wow, there's a fee. And I said, yeah, I want to visit 2 of the winners. And I'll do that on my dime. But I want to go out and walk around, and I want to see what they're doing. So I've been out to see 2 of the folks represented in this room. I'm not going to say who you are. I won't say a thing about you. I was not there to judge you. I was not out there to decide whether you really deserved a prize. I was out there to get educated, to do a little bit more of data collection that I've been doing for many years now, to see where the world is, where the world's going, how people are feeling. And that's how I learn. I never, ever walk through an operation without having an idea. And maybe I'm just getting old and it's the same idea I had 20 years ago. But I keep thinking I'm seeing new things, and as long as it feels that way, I'll keep doing it. Now, the irony of how I got into this, that my walking was commanded by General Motors. This is a supreme irony. I wrote a book in 1990 called Machine That Changed the World, in which General Motors was the chump and Toyota was the hero. And that book was possible because in 1981, MIT had a long relationship with GM, and we were 2 years into a car project with a bunch of academics. And one of the senior GM executives called up and said, gee, have you noticed you guys don't actually know anything? And I said, well, what do you mean, sir? And he said, well, you're doing a big global project on the car industry, and I bet, young man, you've never been in a car plant. And I said, well, sir, that is actually the case, sir. So I said, I'm going to get you a hall pass. I'm going to get you a hall pass. And I want you to walk through General Motors. Now, by the way, that's the same thing that Peter Drucker was asked to do in 1944. And he wrote a book called Concept of the Corporation, which if you haven't read, you really should, which is this sort of hymn of praise to modern management as pioneered by General Motors, which at that time was the world benchmark. It was absolutely the world benchmark. That came out in 46. So here we go again, and GM gave me a hall pass and said, we want you to walk through the company. So I went out and took them literally. I started walking. And I walked through plants, and I walked through supplier plants because GM was largely vertically integrated at that time before they got rid of all the parts. And I walked through engineering, and I walked through sales, and I walked through marketing, and I walked through the dealer management organization. And I walked, and I walked, and I walked. And I learned something really interesting. Number one, your intuition is really powerful if you'll just let it go. And number two, if you don't know how things are supposed to be, just keep your mind open and think some very simple thoughts, which I'll describe in a minute. It's amazing how much you can learn, and it's even useful to the people you're walking with. Crazy thing, how could anybody at GM learn anything from somebody who knows nothing about the car industry? And that was a mutual exercise that went on for some years. And I think we both learned a lot. So that's how I got started. And since that time, I have been walking. This, I believe, is the 13th or 14th week of the year. And I did a little count on the plane this morning. I have walked through 11 organizations so far. And that's a couple of hospitals. I consider a hospital a plant. And it's a couple of 3 totally different kind of manufacturing operations in the States. And just down in Guatemala with an NGO walking through their hospital last week or the week before. So this is a large part of what I do. Now, I say that just to remind you that I've looked at 11 things so far this year, 2 of which are Industry Week prize winners. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some things I saw during those walks, but you would be making a mistake to try to figure out who I'm talking about. You can't figure it out. Because whenever I walk, I try to show respect. It says right there, go see, ask why, show respect in bullet number 4. And you don't show respect by saying bad things about people who have been your host. In this little book, there are 50 essays based on basically 50 walks that I took, and I never identify any of the bad guys. And except it was something you've read in the newspaper or something, it's public knowledge. That I try to be a respectful person at all times. And so therefore, I will have some things to say today about some situations, but who knows who they are. And I have designed it so I think you can't figure it out. Okay. Before I get any further, though, let me just make sure I know who you are. They gave me the numbers, which were probably shown, I don't know, this morning. I came down early this morning, so I didn't get here in time. But I think of you as really two groups of people for the most part. You're either line manufacturing managers. Line manufacturing managers, anybody? You guys actually run something. This is good. Something I haven't done. Or you are leaders or members of improvement teams. And as I counted, that's about 75-80% of the audience. And then there are two more groups, which is people from some of the other functions, and we'll talk about that. And then there's some consultants here who I suspect were mostly in bullet number 1 or number 2, which is how they learned what they now advise on. So I'm talking to you as if you are people who are either line or staff, who are interested in improvement and interested in operational management. And when I say let's talk a walk, that's who I'm going to take a walk with. If you were all engineers in product development, or if you were purchasing people, or you were sales and marketing people, or you were aftermarket product support service people, I would have some different examples and talk a little bit differently about how to take a walk. So that's who I am. That's who you are. Gemba Walk to me is a practice. My friend Mike Rother has got a lovely book called Toyota Kata. You can leave the Toyota part out. Now we're all taking the Toyota part out. Kata is a practice that becomes a habit and that becomes a way of continually seeing more. It's one of those Japanese words. If you don't like that, we'll just call it a practice. But taking a walk is a practice. And what I'm doing when I'm trying to take a walk is trying to grasp the situation. And I think every manager and every improvement team leader needs to be able to grasp the situation. What I do see an awful lot of, that's the Deming wheel, of course, PDCA, or if you don't like that, PDSA, or if you don't like that, hypothesis, try, reflect, and adjust. But what we really do well, and we all know this, we do the do part. We really like the do part. The plan part, well, we'll do some of that, and we hate the C and the A. Okay, and you know that. But what I observe is that people start off to plan without ever having grasped the situation, including what, but seriously, is the problem. What's going on here? So that my walks are designed to grasp the situation, and hopefully to do that in collaboration with other people so that we grasp the situation together. I was just reading Dr. Deming on the plane this morning. I have a confession to make. I had never actually been able to read all the way through Out of the Crisis. I tried before. Dr. Deming was not a natural writer. And I got my copy out, and I've just got a little break in my schedule, and I said, I'm actually going to read Deming. And it's very interesting. He doesn't talk about, he has the Deming wheel, but he never tells you what it is. He never uses the term PDCA. Instead, it's just a very simple sketch. Something that's just so clearly in my head, I feel like that thing's been branded on me. I kept looking for where's the PDCA thing, and it's actually not there. So I'm trying to grasp the situation. So how would I get started, which is to say where, what, why, how, who, when? Those are the questions that I want to answer. Another odd thing that I've been doing, because now I've got time. See, what you do when you are a senior advisor is you do stuff you really want to do, rather than go to office meetings and all that. I don't know how many of you have been involved with training within industry. Does anybody know about training within industry? It's an amazing thing. This is how the Americans won the war. We had okay generals. Not saying anything bad about any generals present, but we had okay generals in World War II. But what we really had a lot of was bombers and tanks. And how do we get it? We took millions of farmers and housewives and turned them into really good manufacturing people very quickly. And we did it through TWI. And then the second the war was over, the whole country just went whoop and threw it all in the trash. And I was just looking at the little card. By the way, here's the PDCA on the TWI card from 1942. But they ask at every job, when they talk about job methods, when you're talking to the worker about the job, you say, why are you doing this? Does this really need to be done? What is the purpose? Where should you do this? When should you do it? Who is best qualified to do it? And then how do you figure out the best way to do it, which turns out to be the same pretty much as what I've got here. And I wrote those before I looked at this. So therefore, I'm just going to go through real quickly those points about gemba walk, and we'll see what we come up with. Well, where would one take a gemba walk? Well, let's go to the gemba. Now, gemba is one of those Japanese words that half of you hate and the other half of you really hate. One more word. But there's a real reason for this word, because in Japanese is kind of metaphorical language. I don't speak it, but I've had people explain it to me. And it's the place where value is created. Do we have a word in our language for the place where value is created? And by the way, you hear gemba and you hear shop floor, but I hear gemba, I hear engineering, the person sitting at the screen, the person doing prototyping at the bench. You say, hear gemba, you hear shop floor. I hear the salesman actually making the sale. I hear the after-market support technician actually fixing the product. From the customer standpoint, those are the instance of value creation. When something is being done to their product, good or service, that is going to help them in their life. So that's gemba. And I don't think there's an English sort of equivalent. So therefore I decided I'll use it, even though it's dragging something else into the language. People seem to have gotten okay now about muda. People still working on mura and muri, still kind of chewing on that. But muda seems to be okay. It's almost like it's English. So gemba is the place where value is created, where the real value creating work is done. Now, by the way, none of us in this room at this moment are creating any value for customers. I mean, I hate to say that, but no one is going to buy your product. Look, just ask yourself, take your provider hat. You got a provider hat, you got a consumer hat. Take your provider hat, put your consumer hat on for a minute, and think the last time you bought a product, did you walk up to the desk, the salesperson, and say, has this product got a lot of conferences in it? Okay? And you also said, how many S's in this product? Have you got 6? How many Sigma? Have you got 7 Sigma maybe in this product? The other guys have got 6. You didn't say any of that, right? What we're doing here today is at best incidental work. And that is, if you learn something and go home and behave in a different and better way, well, then we might create some value. Otherwise, it's just muda. But that's an important distinction in life. There's work, which is what the little people do to actually transform reality for the benefit of customers. And then there's incidental work, which us big folks, the grown-ups, do to help the little people. And then there's muda, which is actually what most of us do most of the time. So, where's gemba? As I say, it's in engineering, it's operations, customer support. And there is a management gemba. It is an incidental work gemba, but you can't create value. And here, let me make you feel better. No individual in your operation can create value without management. I'm not talking about you, of course, but in this country, a lot of people, production associates, have tried to create value without any effective management, and it turns out to be kind of hard work. So therefore, we're not bad. Just no customer wants to pay for us. And we do need to think about that every day when we go in. No customer wants to pay for us. They do want to pay for what your people are doing, but your people probably can't do the job without you. So you're necessary but not sufficient. That's where. Let's go take a walk. And what's a walk? Well, look, a walk's a walk. Use your feet. If you want to look at a whole extended value creation process, you might need a car or an airplane. And I do a fair bit of that as well. But mostly you can use your feet. It's kind of an amazing concept that you could learn something just by using your feet. And note, it is a horizontal journey. It is a horizontal journey through a whole bunch of actions and activities that flow horizontally across your organization to the customer. That's very important. Value flows horizontally across the organization, across departments and areas and functions, and even your organization and your suppliers and your customers, who then finally get the product to your customers' customers. And why are you taking a leap? Why are you taking a walk? We'll talk about a leap in a minute. Why are you taking a walk? Well, you want to do better. You want to transform. I get a lot of people calling me, and that's how I get into a lot of these walks. Well-intentioned managers, sometimes very senior managers, say, I want to transform my company. Could you come to the strategy meeting or the bonus boys meeting and tell us something inspiring? And I say, well, I have a rule, which I violated once for Industry Week, but it's the only time in the last 20 years. No walk, no talk. And by the way, if we all took a walk together, you wouldn't need a talk. You know, we could just cut that step out altogether. We don't have to go to the club or the resort. We could just stay right there in the factory, and we might all learn something. And they call because they want to do better. And again, I try to be respectful. I think most human beings want to do better. I want to do better. You want to do better. Perhaps they're involved in some kind of a leap already, but they're not getting traction, and they can't sustain. Can't sustain anything. I expect some of you have been there. I've been there a few times in life. And so they say, gosh, could we take a walk and talk about, or could you come talk to us, and forget the walk, about sustainable improvement? And I say, let's go watch people try to improve, and let's see what happens. And then one of the most important things to me, and I say the thing I enjoy the most about walking, is that I love to take young managers with me. I think the most underrated thing any manager does is manufacture the next generation of managers. That in this country, we got an idea some time ago that you could outsource management education by sending people to management school. Let me suggest that no one ever learned how to manage in management school. You could learn some good technical skills and how to do financial manipulations and how to merge and acquire and divest and so forth, but you're not going to learn how to manage in a management school, and most honest people there admit you're not going to learn how to manage. You're going to learn how to manage from your boss. You're going to learn how to manage bad. You're going to learn how to manage good. And yet, when you look at your job evaluation, there's something, some box to check there. So did you do some mentoring? But how? I mean, sure, I did some mentoring. You know, I stayed late and talked to this poor guy who's overextended and is going to get his home foreclosed and gave him a hug. And, well, come on, guys, that's not mentoring. Mentoring, in a meaningful way, is to say, hey, let's go look at a situation together, and let me ask you some questions. By the way, we have a wonderful book, and I don't get any royalty on this, so I'm not just shilling something, called Managing to Learn, that John Shook, my successor, wrote. It's just one of the best management books there is. And it is a very simple story of a boss and his subordinate, and you see what happens when they try to solve a problem together. And two things happen. They countermeasure the problem. I've tried to take solution out of my vocabulary. I just talk about countermeasuring. They try to countermeasure the problem, and in the process, that young man becomes a different person. And he actually becomes more like a lean manager. So I love walks where we got young people. I did one of those here recently with a energetic young guy, and I must say I just didn't feel he had ever had a real mentor. And by the time we got to the end of the day, I just wanted to, say, hey, why don't you just come work with me for a while? We might learn something here. I couldn't do that. But that's why we're walking. Well, wait a minute. Why can't you just figure this out in a conference room? Why can't you do this with PowerPoint? By the way, every time I go to a company, even really good companies, it is amazing the desperate need to take me to the conference room and show me PowerPoint to tell me what I'm going to see. And I say, guys, just unplug that thing. Let's throw it out the window. Why don't we just go look? Why do we have to turn this into PowerPoint? It's an amazing thing. By the way, in the Managing to Learn book, there's quite a lot of discussion about A3, which is the standard one-page problem countermeasure technique that we learned from the Toyota guys. And one of the very best things about A3 is that you can't put it on a screen because you can't read it. It's one of the things I love most about it. You can put it on a wall and have everybody stand there looking at it, but you can't do it. You sitting back there in a conference room on a screen because you can't read it. It's an amusing thing to watch how people try to work their way around it, and they de-aggregate it by all the little boxes and turn it into 10 PowerPoints rather than one. And then I'll go pull the plug out myself if you start that. So why do you need to go take a walk? And the answer is because two things. Number one, life is complicated. And number two, the nature of all organizations is that they are vertical. Why should this be? I don't know. Why is gravity 1g? There it is. Why is the speed of light 186,000 miles a second? Organizations want to be vertical. They want to have departments, baffles, dividers, functions, silos, and everybody wants to look up toward the boss. And why? Well, look, there's good reason for that. It's how we accumulate knowledge. It's how we manage careers. It's how we keep track of assets. It's how we kind of feel like we know where we are. And, of course, it's a prison. No texting, please. No voicemail. Let's just stand here together looking at this map perhaps we've created and talk about how together we can optimize the whole rather than separately optimize ourselves. So that's what we're trying to do. By the way, as I've already said, all value is created at the bottom. This is not some heroic ode of praise to the working person. That's not the point. It's just a fact. It could be good. It could be bad. But from your customer standpoint, the person who's spraying the paint on the product or welding it or screwing it together, that's the person that's creating the value. Not the boss or the boss's boss or the boss's boss's boss. That all looks suspiciously like overhead. And no customer has ever bought a product and said, gee, is there a lot of overhead in this thing? In which case, I will pay more. This thing got overhead? I want to pay more. So, as I say at the bottom, the Gimbal Walk, the way I try to do it, tries to help managers see the whole and reconcile the horizontal with the vertical. It's really pretty simple. Now, by the way, I'll get to it in a minute, but when I get to this point, when we're just talking, now I'm just talking at you, but we were actually having a conversation, people will say, oh, you're right, we should have value stream managers. And all the resources will report horizontally to the value stream manager. And I say, best of luck. Sounds to me like a matrix in the making. Those of you who've worked in matrix situations where you have two bosses will be scratching your head at this point. I must say, I just don't believe that's going to work. I think there's something else that will work, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, how? Well, I went to see 2 of your winners, and I've seen 9 other organizations since the first of the year. And the way it works is this. I say, please, let's not go to the conference room. What is the fundamental unit of value creation in your business? And I believe it is the horizontal value stream. Do you even know what those are for your products? It's products that flow through a similar path. By the way, it could be in different buildings in different countries, but they flow through a similar path and have the same things done to them. So what are your product families? And when I started on this 15 years ago, nobody knew. Now some people know. Say, great, why don't we pick one? Why don't we pick one of those? And then let me ask you some questions. Now don't forget, I almost never look at anything I know anything about. This is a great advantage. Okay, that you just get lost in the weeds when you know all this stuff. But I'm asking the same questions every time. I've given away my secret now. You don't need me. Just ask these questions to yourself, and you can get the benefit. I say, look, let's find a value stream. And that's the same thing in my terms as a process. Now, that word process is a little confusing. You have the paint process. But to me, a process, as I say in the bullet, is a sequence of actions that must be taken correctly in the right order at the right time, start to finish, in order to create value for some customer. So that's all I mean. So can we go take a look? So that process is a sequence of actions that you accumulate into a value stream, but of course it's flowing horizontally through a whole bunch of vertical processes: the HR process, the accounting process, the IT process, purchasing process, the engineering process for manufacturing people, and so on. So you have an intersection not just of silos and horizontal value, but of processes. And that's why you have to think of it in system terms. And all a system is something that's interconnected, so if something happens here, it has an effect here. And in fact, every point in the system, when you do something, it has an effect somewhere else. Let's just think of it as a spreadsheet. You change a number here, and all the numbers change here. And so that is something that you have to keep in mind. So, select a stream. And by the way, people always say, well, which one? And I say, well, it doesn't make any difference. By the way, I can tell you from long experience that we're going to discover the same issues in all of your value streams. We will. And so just pick one. Let's not agonize over this. The one that's giving you the most pain, the one that never gives you pain, I don't care. Let's just pick one and take a walk. And then this is the hardest part, could we get everybody together who touches this thing? And could we take a walk together? And then, we got the calendars out, and everybody's looking at their calendar, and, this is just a Rubik's Cube problem. I've been doing a project with, I think I can say this here, with the Food and Drug Administration of the United States. And the process we're working on affects all of your lives, particularly those of you who are getting older. This is the drug authorization process. It is a process, and you have never seen silos, like the silos they have in Washington, D.C. and Silver Spring, Maryland, that this poor drug approval has to flow through. So we had a very simple proposal. Let's get the heads of all the functions together to take a walk together. Everyone whips out their iPhone or their BlackBerry. Everybody goes to work, and we've been working for 3 weeks to take a day. So we need a whole day. A whole day? Yeah, to look at how you create value. Oh, we're way behind already. I love that one. We're way behind already. Okay, you keep working harder the way you're doing things, and we'll see how much further you are behind by the time you finally agree to take a walk together. But that's what you need. There is no substitute for FaceTime. It meant we just desperately want to get away from FaceTime. We want everything to be impersonal, electronic. And we want nothing but side conversations. Okay? Hey, we're all going to get together and talk about this thing. Well, wait a minute, could I talk to you before the meeting? Well, now after the meeting, I need to talk to you. I say, no, wait a minute, guys. Why don't we all just talk to each other right here and talk about the things that none of us wants to talk about? And who knows, life might even get better. So, we've done the impossible. We have gotten a group of people together. We've picked a value stream. And then my first question, very simple, what is the purpose of this activity? And that usually stops the conversation. And I say, well, could we ask the customer? Because here's my observation about life, that organizations survive and prosper because they do a better job of solving customer problems. So I believe if you want to survive, much less prosper, this process, this value stream, must have some benefit for the customer. So what customer problem are you solving? Well, now we're going to get them a green widget that we deliver just on the promised day with no defects at just the right price or whatever. Say, fine. Okay, now, wait a minute. Are you sure that's good enough? Are you sure that's really going to solve the problem? But let's assume for the minute it is. All right, well, now if that's your purpose, how good is this value stream at solving that customer problem? And look, just simple manufacturing things. Can you deliver it on time? Does it work? Does it have the right capability, functionality? Did you put the cord in the box? What about cost? Price. Your price must have something to do with your cost, right? I think. So therefore, if the price is too high, it's probably because your cost is too high. So let's just talk about what the issue here is. By the way, in the Food and Drug Administration, I think I can say this, that it takes $2 billion in 12 years to get a drug approved for sale in this country. And in the days when you had the tight oligopoly in the drug game, and they had Lipitor, God bless Lipitor, which is going off patent in about 4 months, all of you who, are at that age. And that goes $12 billion to the bottom line at Pfizer, disappears in one day. Think about that, running a business where you lose not $12 billion in revenue because there's practically no cost for that $12 billion. It's all net. And that made drug companies willing to put up with this crazy 12 years and $2 billion. And now they're saying, we can't do it. There aren't any more Lipitors. We've hit all the home runs. And so what are we going to do now? So we got to look at the process. And the customer, by the way, who's paying for this, did I explain that drug companies pay to have drugs approved. So the FDA doesn't actually have an incentive from a financial standpoint to do better. But they're all docs and PhDs, and they're there because they want to cure people. And so their whole motivation is to cure the patient rather than to help the drug company. But okay, so now we got this clear. This takes too long, and it costs too much, Oh, and then wait a minute. No drug, if you may have noticed, is ever released into general use without being recalled for something. Our labels have to be put on, by the way, don't take it if you've got this, don't take it if you've got that, don't take it, till finally you get that great long thing that comes with packing that tells you all the things that this kills you for, right? So therefore, it's not a high-quality process. It costs too much and it takes too long. Enough said. Could we now talk about why? What is it about your process that makes it impossible at this point in time to truly solve your customer's problem? Well, now let's get back to you. Most of you make widgets or wadgets or gadgets. Some of you are in the service business as well, I realize. But what is this process not doing that your customer needs? So then we have to talk about how it actually works. And I love this, that people always want to tell you about how something is supposed to work. And I had it happen again to me the other day. This has happened time and again over the years, that I was in a company, and this was their value stream for their highest volume and also highest profit product. And just when I started the walk, the whole thing stopped. And by the way, it was out for the day because they had a bad part from a supplier and they didn't have any extras. And they said, oh, but this is not normal. And I said, well, gee, I've been doing this for 30 years and I never see anything that's normal. It must be me. Or is it you? Is it me or is it you? Let's talk about what's really here. And by the way, we'll often just draw a little map. And then the third question for me is, once we see how the process works and what the problem is, I have a third question, and then the prosecution rests. I say, how do you engage your people in addressing these problems? How do you engage? How do you improve? How do you get better? Just tell me. And by the way, let me talk to the people. Let's hear from them. So that is what I do. Very simple thing. Now you don't need me. Each product family, what's the problem? Or what's the customer problem you're not solving? What's the actual state of the process? What's actually happening? And by the way, many of the bad things that are happening are because the functions don't align or the people aren't aligned with the management. And it just jumps out at you when you're just standing there looking at it. Now, by the way, you could draw a map or not. I've been doing this so long, really, all the time since about 1980 or 81, that for me, I don't need to draw a map. I can just see it. It just jumps right into my head. About 5 minutes discussion, I can kind of figure out the purpose thing. And if I just walk through the process, I could just immediately take a pen. I can say, look, here's how information management works. Here are all the steps. Here's rough capability. Here's the availability. Here's the... Well, if you do something for 30 years, you're probably going to get a little better at it, even though I don't know anything about it. But some people feel the comfort of a crutch. That's why we introduced this. This is the famous map from Learning to See, the Acme stamping example. Now remember, this is a process layout factory, a process village factory, so that you don't see any of this unless you've trained your head to see it, that there's a stamping department, there's a welding department, there's an assembly department, there's a shipping department. They're all in their own little ghetto. And so therefore there's no line of sight visibility about what's going on. There's an MRP that's busy spitting the wrong instructions. The one thing that's actually not, if I were doing this map over, and it's John Shook's map, so I can't really touch it, but what I would show is the on-the-floor change of the production sequence that the line management's doing every minute. Because this is wrong, we don't have any parts for that, what are we going to do? So there are actually two scheduling systems. There's the official system that's kind of coming down from the rafters. And then there's what people do to get through the day. And that's not on there, and that's really important. So how it's really working is not drawn as fully as it should be. But under those steps, what we've written on all of those is how capable are they? In other words, what's the defect or turnback rate? How available are they? What's the uptime? And when I say uptime, I mean it will run if you need it to run, not utilization, but simply can it run when you need it to run? How flexible is it? If you've got a bottleneck, you've got a capacity constraint somewhere, all those things we just put in the little boxes. And then, by the way, when you do this, the one thing you always learn in life is that it takes crazy amounts of time on this planet at this point in time to do anything. And in this example, which is, for an old-fashioned operation kind of typical, that it takes basically 30 days to do 3 minutes of work. And so then that gets you thinking about, well, no, wait a minute, why would it take? And oh, wait a minute, we can't respond to customer orders because we have to start 30 days in advance. And customers change their mind all the time, and then the MRP is always sending the wrong instructions anyway, and so on, and so it gets you started. But whether you need that map or not is not the point. The objective of the walk is not to draw a map. It's not to solve a problem, a specific problem. It's not to plan, to do, to check, or to act. It is to grasp the situation about how good your organization is at knowing what its purpose is, how good a typical process is, and how people are currently engaged, if at all, if effectively, in trying to make it better. It's amazing how much you learn just walking along. And then, of course, once you understand, well, you can start having an intelligent, cross-functional, cross-department, cross-area discussion about how could we do better. Well, by the way, everybody's standing there. Okay, well, who should do this? Well, here's the hard part, of course. Well, gee, I wish we had a world in which we had CEOs and COOs that could actually take a walk. Now, here's what I observe when CEOs and COOs do take a walk. One of two things happens. They either make ridiculous suggestions. What you need here is 7S. We need to repaint this floor. Everybody should get their uniform washed more often. Whatever, just nonsense. It's got nothing to do with anything. Because the big man is supposed to say something or, what to do. Or they get an easel or a flat screen at every point where they stop that tells them what they're seeing. And they nod sagely. And I've been on those tours with high-priced CEOs, and here you have the easel or the flat screen standing right next to a production area that tells you what wonderful things have been done and what you're seeing. And all you have to do is crank your head 90 degrees and stand there for a minute. And you will realize that what's in the video and what's actually happening are two totally different things. And by the way, the CEO never says anything. Just keeps on walking, get me out of here. Okay? What a shame. That, bosses are traumatized because they think they're supposed to have answers because they get paid so much. It's one of the great burdens with the crazy money we pay CEOs in this country. You really have to try to pretend you're worth it, right? So therefore, you should have the answers, right? This is completely ludicrous. Okay. So I wish CEOs and COOs could do this. It would be a better world, not because they're going to do anything other than just in their own mind grasp their situation in their company. How are we doing? Are we able to define what product we're going to solve for the customer and how we're doing? Do we have the ability as a team to see our value-creating process? Are we effectively engaging our people respectfully in making things better? Well, that would be great if that would happen. And by the way, if there really were what I call value stream leaders, which is a person, this is not a job, this is a way of being, somebody who's got their head around this, and any value stream you've got, there would be somebody who says, it's not my job, but I've taken the responsibility to really keep on top of this thing. Now, out walking these last 14 weeks, one operation I visited sticks in mind. And it was a plant with a plant manager, a small plant, maybe 150 people. And the plant manager met me at the door. And we did go to the conference room. It wasn't too painful, but I said, could we get out of here? But then I said, what's your purpose? And he said, well, you've really got to talk from a value stream standpoint. I said, whoa, this guy's okay. And we got 3 value streams. The plant looks complicated when you go in, but actually there are only 3 things we're doing. There are 3 product families here. And I know exactly what our customer problem with everyone is. And the first one, there's been a big boost in demand, but I don't think it's sustainable. And my people are saying, hire people and add machines. And I'm saying, no, we got to figure out some way to make more with what we got because this ain't going to last. And the second one has some quality issues. And the third one, which is more of a job shop kind of deal where they do short runs on special orders, we're just not flexible enough. That we can't get it done fast enough, get set up and run it. So I thought, this is really good. And then I talked with people who were clearly quite engaged in how they actually improve things. I thought, gosh, if everybody I met was like this, this would be a different country. I think you had a talk early this morning about how America could become a manufacturing power again. And just from the notes I read on it, I don't know whether the gentleman is here, but it was all kind of stuff outside the box. It was kind of tax policy and this and that and so forth. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, I'm really concerned about what's inside the box. What are you doing with your people to make us world beaters, rather than how we're going to change the environment in a way that's going to make it work? By the way, here's my big fear right now on what's happening. That because our dollar is sinking and because we can't afford to buy foreign products, my fear is that it will now be safe to be mediocre manufacturers in this country. Okay? That the cloud passed over. We're now poor, so we can't buy stuff, so we have to make it ourselves. And we start patting ourselves on the back about, wow, we really did it, whereas in fact we haven't proved it all. It's just that for various reasons, customers have less choice. That is my nightmare fear about where we might wind up. So please don't let that happen. I'm just a bystander. You're the people who actually can keep that from happening. So look, I love the idea of having value stream manager. In this case, the plant manager, small plant, clearly had all three of his value streams. He absolutely had it in his mind's eye. He didn't need to take a step. He could have described the whole thing, and he could have told me exactly how they were doing. And I thought, whoa, that would be wonderful if that was the way it was everywhere, but it's not. So, as I say, the CEO and COO usually lack both the knowledge and the courage. And mostly when I say, who is the responsible person for this value stream? Well, when you ask enough questions, you finally figure this poor product that somehow or other got through this thing is an orphan. It just wandered through, and it actually got out at the end. Must have been a tough go. So, by the way, I love the word responsibility. The general at lunch was talking about accountability. Accountability, the sort of implication is that I'm going to come around and check. Responsibility is someone who says, you know, I'm just going to make this happen. You don't even have to check on me. I'm going to make this happen. The future is going to be better than the past because of me, and I'm going to do it right now. When you read, if you do, and I hope you will, the little book, Managing to Learn, that John has written, that young man, he has the teacher who's his boss, young man, and he is given the responsibility for fixing, improving a process. Not one person working in that process reports to this young man, not one. And the boss tells him, says, young man, you need to lead as if you have no authority. I am asking you to take the responsibility. That is so powerful. Forget about authority. Take the responsibility. Make it happen. So, that leaves you. The CEO and the COO, and I know we've got a few CEOs of smaller companies here, COOs of smaller companies, but if there's no value stream responsible, and the CEO and the COO aren't, well, that leaves you. And those are some categories of things that some of you do toward the top, and probably we don't have too many sales managers here who are looking downstream. Our purchasing managers are looking upstream. And my gosh, I wish I could turn every purchasing person in America into a process thinker. That purchasing still, for the most part, is about the squeeze and about expediting parts. And you can't get anywhere with that. You can get a little where for a short period of time, but that's what we need. So, look, I hope those of you who are plant managers, those of you who are VPs for ops, those of you who are area managers, can step up, do a little thinking about how you could be a walker and do some good. By the way, you're familiar with the term management by walking around, MBWA, popularized by Tom Peters. That is probably not what I mean. That if you remember, the management by walking around idea was that the big boss jumps in his car, goes flying over to the customer, says, how do you think we're doing? And then goes the other way to the supplier and says, how do you think we're doing? And then runs down to the plant and talks to the machine operator and says, have you got any ideas for improvement? And then runs to engineering and talks to the young engineer and says, do you have any blockbuster ideas? That was in his book called Passion for Excellence. I think it is not coincidental that his next book was called Thriving on Chaos. Whatever you heard from this, you didn't hear try manage by walking around. A gemba walk is very focused. It has a very clear purpose, which is to determine customer purpose and whether you're addressing it. What about our process? How does it really work? How are we engaging our people? What do we need to do? Now, by the way, once you've grasped that situation, well, then it's time to do a lot of PDCA. And we're pretty good at that. We sort of understand that technically, but there has to be a context. Okay, almost at the end here. When might you do this? Well, before starting a big transformation. Don't you have to grasp your situation before you take a big leap? Hey, as often as necessary. Take these pills as often as necessary. When you feel you really don't know how your process is addressing your purpose and how you're engaging your people. And look, in some cases, maybe you even need to take a walk every day. This is just an aside at the end, but this is the management gemba walk. I was just in a company that I dearly love, that I've even put in a book in the past, but they don't want visitors, so I won't tell you about them just for the moment. But what I went on was the gemba walk, in which the head of the company heads out every morning at 8, and he goes to every area in operations where there is a board. And what's on the board is a list of what the cross-functional issues are. And every person in every area goes along. And in real time, they decide, what are we going to do? And then at 10 o'clock, he goes through all the functions, that's sales, marketing, engineering, productions, HR. Everybody goes, and they take a walk around looking at boards that show what the current state is, what the issues are, and in real time, they resolve problems. Those of you who do have a product development role may think, gosh, sounds like the Obeya room. Obeya room, if you remember, is a way to take a walk without having to go very far, because all of the teams that are involved in a development project, each has their board, each has their problems. Everybody walks around together, and you do real-time problem resolution on where you stand. There are books being written about that now. It's a wonderful idea. I'm going to try to write something about this company I was just out looking at, one of the 11 I've looked at this year. So there are different ways to take walks, but walking is good. Okay, here's my hypothesis that this is a great way to truly grasp your situation so that good, lean things can happen. And it's a practice. Once you fall into it, and I've been into it for 30 years, but once you get into it, it's sort of like breathing. It's just obvious, don't we periodically need to go take a walk? We need to do this together. We need to be honest. We need to be respectful. We need to grasp our situation. Not something you can do in a conference room, not something you can do at the strategy retreat, not something that's part of the annual plan necessarily, but a practice which you can learn by doing. That's the only way you can learn, and which you can learn from doing. So think about that. I'd be happy if anybody wants to talk a little bit. I'm not in the consulting business, but if you've got questions, I've got an email, and I'd be happy to go back and forth. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. And I gather this evening, got to go out to the ballpark. There's no ball team, but we're going out to the ballpark. I'm still scratching my head on that one, but we'll figure it out. I don't know, maybe they took the mood out or something. Anyway, no, wait a minute, they took the value out. They took the value out. Okay, look, that's the book. Chet will be happy to sell you one. Hey, I got to make a living somehow. By the way, this book is not that much book on a single topic of gemba walks. There's one essay on gemba walks. There are 49 other essays on things that occurred to me while I was walking over the last 10 years. And I've put them together, organized them by theme, and given them a context. I'm told it's a great airplane book. It's also a good doorstop. It's very substantial. And there's the Kindle version if you don't like molecules. So, thank you. And let's take a few questions, and then we'll get you on your way. Got some mics there?
Yeah, with value being added on the plant floor and looking at continuous improvement and the engine for continuous improvement being the people doing continuous improvement over time, what do you look for on the gemba walks that kind of helps you measure or size up the people side of the process and that ongoing continuous improvement?
Well, if you ask about what have you... Oops, I'm going to get some feedback there. I guess I'm not supposed to stand there. I want to see something that somebody's tried to improve. And I want to ask about it. What happened? By the way, there is a whole lot more improved than stays improved. Okay, that's kind of the nature of things, you know, the sawbone. You get to the end of the year and you've done 100 Kaizens and you've got one Kaizen worth of benefit because the other 99 sort of disappeared. So what I'm asking is, hey, could we just hear, you know, with the folks who are doing the work, what improvement activities have you been involved in? And what happened? And was that a good result? Did you get a good result? Is your improvement process capable? Is it repeatable? And you hear some really interesting things when you ask. They're not all good things. And that's good. That it would be pretty shocking if they were all good things because we don't see that much sustainable improvement. So I try, by the way, to be very respectful. I just say one word about the concept of respect. I do, when I'm out walking around, and you should as managers, feel free to ask hard questions. And people's first reaction when they tell you something that this just can't be the whole story. And so then you ask the follow-up question and the follow-up question and the follow-up question. First reaction as a human being is that that's sort of aggressive and hostile. But actually it's the highest form of respect. What I'm saying to those folks is, you know, I think there's more to this story. I think there's more that you can tell me. I think you've thought about this. Could you please share your experience with me, including the bad stuff? And I think that's actually the best form of respect there is, to ask people hard questions, but with an earnest manner, in which you're saying, gosh, let me ask you some hard things, but we're all going to be better off for trying to answer these. So now tell me about that. You told me that, but I still don't understand why, and I don't understand why, and so on. So that's what I try to do. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a leadership team that is supporting us in our OPEX efforts, lean and everything we're working on. But I also have a problem in that there's a strong financial requirement on absorption in the plant. And we're seeing the numbers going the wrong way. Is there some magic message I can give them?
Well, let me just to... I don't know whether you can do this, but a message, let's get them involved in some improvement. My good friend Ori Fume, who did a book called Real Numbers that you might want to read. But Ori was a complete, total orthodox beam counter blockhead before Art Byrne, and I sort of arrived at Warmold as an observer just when this was happening. Art put Ori, his CFO, in charge of an improvement activity to reduce setup time. And this, these are stamping and other kinds of machines. And this seemed like a completely absurd thing to do, that the CFO said, but I don't know anything, I don't want to waste time on this, why are you doing this to me? And Art said, well, because the way you think is detrimental to the company, so I thought we would just let you see how your thought process intersects with our need. And the way to do that would be to go out and look at this issue. And it changed Ari's life. And it wasn't changed over dinner. It wasn't changed in a classroom. That he was actually put in a situation where he could see for himself what was happening as they reduced setup time. And then, of course, their inventories were plummeting, which, by the way, their profits were plummeting because the way you do accounting sometimes, where inventories are an asset, well, as you bleed off assets, well, your short-term profitability goes down. That's an example of getting somebody to actually go look at the reality of value creation as opposed to the artificiality of the way we keep score. You know, almost all scoring systems are bad in some way because all scoring systems can be gamed, and no scoring system really very accurately captures fundamental reality. So that what I want to do when I talk to finance people is say, have you ever actually rolled up your sleeves and tried to participate in what value creation really is? And then you work backwards to think about how we should do accounting that causes people to do more with less, to do the right thing every time. It's a really interesting little exercise. What kind of a scoreboard do you need to get people to do the right thing? And there's no perfect scoreboard. What I do see in companies all the time is more and more elaborate scoreboards, more and more things being measured, and it's all measuring outputs, results. And of course, the people who are playing the game are saying, but we don't know how to do better. So number one, you've got more metrics and more accountability, and then you're either giving us incentives or you're giving us penalties. And the only thing we haven't talked about is how you actually create more value. It's kind of like out at the ballpark tonight. I'm sure they've got a heck of a scoreboard, and the team's not doing very well, so the owner says, well, let's build a bigger scoreboard because we need more data on conversion ratios and, whether you struck out on the third pitch or the second pitch or the ninth pitch or whatever. And the players are saying, but we don't know how to bat and catch. And the owner says, no problem, let me give you bonuses. And then you're still losing games. Let's make bigger bonuses. The next guy to get a home run gets $10 million. And the guy says, but I don't know which end of the bat to hold. And it's just a crazy, crazy thing of trying to, instead of starting with the process of how you create value, you start with a scoreboard. And yet that is what sort of modern management has gotten us to. By the way, I do have a nice little essay, I think, in this book on modern management versus lean management. And you might want to just take a look at that and ask yourself what kind of company you work in. If you work in a modern management company, you've got problems. If you work in a lean management company, you're very lucky because there aren't very many of them. But you just might want to think, what kind of company are you? Most of you, if I may say, no insult intended, because I'm not really talking about you, but about your CEO and your CFO and your COO and so forth, are pretty orthodox modern managers. That's the GMGE system. That's had some bells and whistles put on it. But it really hasn't changed in about 100 years. And I think we need to get way beyond that, so I've got a few suggestions on how to do that. Let's see, we got time for one more question, and then folks have to go to the next thing. Maybe we don't even, let's do one more here.
Hi, Jim. My question is, if the CEO participates in a gemba walk across a value stream, and maybe there are 13 functions across the value stream, and there are 3 layers of management vertically in that value stream, how does he position it so those managers don't feel disempowered by the process?
Disempowered. Well, look, first off, what we're trying to do here is just collectively get to agreement on our situation. And so the point is not what do we do right now immediately with regard to PDCA. Can we reach agreement on how we really work together? Can we reach agreement on what we do to create value? Can we just talk about this a little bit with everybody present, looking at the real stuff, which is what the little people are doing to do things for the customer, and what the big folks are often mostly thwarting. So let's talk about that. Now look, that might be a little bit off-putting to some of your managers. There are a lot of people who really do like their offices, and they really do like PowerPoint, and they really do like the conference room, and they really do like all those side conversations where you're going to try to do side deals so that you don't have to do what it was you just agreed to in the team meeting. Okay, but we all know that's bad. We all know we shouldn't do that, so let's stop doing it. And one good way to get started on that is to take a walk together. So with that, let me send you off to the next thing. I'm going to appear around in our little booth, and happy to talk to anybody. I'm here under your management, and I will do whatever it is I'm supposed to do. But I am here to talk to anybody who wants to talk. Thank you so much for being such an attentive group. Let us be clear on the way out. You're not actually creating the value, but the people you're managing are creating the value. In the future, for any country, whether it's bright or it's hopeless, is based on how much value a given group of people can create in the future compared to how much they're creating now. So we've either just wasted an hour, it was all Muda, Or there's a few ideas here somewhere that are worth an experiment. Think of taking a walk as an experiment. So please, I hope, take some experiments. If you do something or discover something or find something, give me a call. I write books. My biggest problem as an author of what let's call business books is that I don't want to write fiction. If you've read a lot of business books, you will know they are mostly fiction. And if you don't know it, you should, as I do, go visit the company they were writing about. And why are they writing fiction? It's because there really isn't a good story to tell. I want to write true books, but I can't write true books unless somebody does something good, improves something in a dramatic and sustainable way. That's not going to be me, because I don't run anything. That's going to be you. So if you do something brilliant and you want to be in a book or in an article, let me know. And I can make you famous for up to 15 minutes. Okay, thank you.